Hey everybody, welcome back to Evo Inspires. I'm Miriam. I specialize in software development here in Sydney, and I'm so excited for today. We have Daniel with us, but before we get into today's questions, I will pass it over to Daniel to give himself a quick intro.
Yeah, thank you so much, Miriam, for having me today. So my name is Daniel. I'm currently working at Shippit. So my current role is actually head of product engineering. I've been in industry for about 14 years and more, and essentially just moved into management for the last 4 years. Yeah, that's roughly about me.
Awesome, amazing. Well, let's get into it with the first question for today. So what is one piece of career advice you wish someone had given you when you were starting out, Daniel?
Yeah, to be honest, right, reflecting back to my past experiences, I felt like when I decided to take the software engineering, no one has ever told me that your job is not just about coding. In my head, I thought hey, what's going to be different, right? It's just like programming, you just write the code. But as I went through different levels, right, I realized that there are a couple of things that as a software engineer you need to have. Definitely one is you need to understand the business context. You can't just be like, oh, I'm going to do this. But start asking yourself why. Why are you doing this? Because that's an important question, right? Because, okay, am I going to actually get a good impact to the business, right? Because that's one thing that you're working on. You need to understand why the business wants it. And again, you can't just okay, great, now I do programming, I do the business context and understand the domain, but what else, right? And from my past experiences, I feel then you grow more into the senior, and more senior role means that you require soft skills such as communication. Because, think about it as oh, you're working as a software engineer, and in people's head, they'll be oh, you're, maybe working in your own cubicle, just doing software, writing program. But in reality, right, you have your peers, you work in a team, you talk to your peers, right? You really spend the time. And as you grow into more senior role, you started to actually work with more stakeholders. And the way you communicate will be different. As an example, when I was a software engineer, I can actually speak more about the technical, right? I communicate to other peers, the software engineers, and so on. Then when I became more lead engineer, staff engineer, it's more hey, how do I talk to the product managers more? How do I actually spend time with the other principal engineers and so on? But as moving to the leadership, now your communication is different. You're not talking the details of it. You're talking about the high level, why are you doing this and so on. And you need to be able to actually influence the other people. Especially in my current role right now, I need to oversee a couple of engineering leaders and also a lot of other engineers below them. So I can't just be talking the details, right? I can't just hey, have you done your code and so on, right? I need to understand all right, what's your challenges that you have? How can I actually unblock you and so on? And yeah, that's definitely the thing, right? It's not just purely programming. It becomes more beyond that. It's communications, understand the business, the domain side of things.
Amazing. That is such great insight. I never thought about that before. So that's awesome. And moving on to our next question, could you please share a pivotal moment in your own career journey that you think has made a significant impact?
Yeah, so I have done a couple of jobs in the startup land, some also in more established kind of company. But there's one experience in the startup where I think it shaped me to be a leader. So essentially in that, right, if you think about it, how do you become a good manager, right? Usually you tell an interesting story, but hey, I actually have a really good manager. They've done this, they've done that, and so on. But in my experience, I actually learned from what I need to avoid. So as an example, I had an opportunity to work on this kind of like, let's say, project, right? It's critical for the business. I was only given handful of engineers. I don't have any product managers. I wasn't given like designers and so on. But then, the manager say like, oh, we need you to get it done in 3 months time. And I was like, okay, you don't give me the support. You expect me to do this? And, like, what can I do, right? What is it within my remit that I can do to actually deliver that? And the thing is, in my head is like, I don't want to force people to actually work overtime, right? Because that's not like what I believe should be done. So essentially, like the learning from that, it's like, okay, in order for you to get like a really, like effective team, as a leader, you need to show like, the right example. You need to actually be there, present, and actually say, oh, I'm supporting you. What do you need? And so on. Right? And essentially like throughout like the journey also, I was even like asked, hey, we've got like some of the juniors, right? We need to get them working more, working harder. But for me, I was like, that's not like what I believe. I believe like they need to work smarter and then give me an opportunity to actually coach them. What is smarter mean? So yeah, essentially like, yeah, the couple of like, like I wish I can say like I had some good managers. Sure, some of the managers I've got actually really nice, They built me in a way that, I become like the leader right now, right? I get like the right thing that to do. I understand what are the things that I want to avoid. Because why? Because I experience like what it's like when you actually have like a bad leader.
Yeah, amazing. And that's so interesting. I've had a few tech leaders say that they worked in a startup and that's where they learned so much. It really elevated their career. So that's so interesting. You mentioned that.
I actually agree though. I mean, like, yes, startup, adding people is one thing, but like, hey, you need to work more hours. You work really hard. Yes, you've got like the trade-off, right? So you're actually learning a lot with your time also, right? So I guess like it depends like which stage of your life you are at. And you might say like maybe startup is not for you, maybe startup is for you kind of thing. But definitely you will actually learn a lot.
100%. Awesome. And moving on to our final question for today is, how do you approach challenges and setbacks in your professional career? And what is your go-to strategy for overcoming those?
Yeah, I think for myself, I've got this kind of like mindset that if I get like, let's say something challenging, right? One is I need to acknowledge. If I don't have the right skill, I need to acknowledge, right? I need to be able to say like, hey, this is not my area of expertise, right? Because I feel like a lot of like leaders, sometimes they don't want to be seen as weak, right? They want to be seen like, hey, I actually know everything. But for myself, I might just say like, hey, I don't actually know about this. I might actually delegate to the right person. Especially also like time boxing, right? So I think time boxing is always be like the thing that I've implemented since my early career. If you got a problem, right, you time box it. You give yourself a time to actually solve something. But you need to think about, once you try as hard as you can, what's the next step? And that means next step can be like asking the right people. But then that means also you need to understand who are the right people in the business to actually help you. Right? So doing it like step by step, I think the challenges can be like many things, right? If you're talking about software engineering, usually they talk about technical challenges. And technical challenges, to be honest, like could be like easier to solve than, let's say, people's problem, right? So I think in my career so far, I've dealt with like some challenging people, right? As the people leader, it's not like something that oh, there's a textbook that tells you how to deal with these people. No, right? So essentially, like with that, you have your own challenges. You can ask people, yes, but maybe the advice might not work. So I think in my journey, I always believe that one is try to actually understand what the problem is. Try to actually break it down into like smaller things. Hey, maybe like, let's say if technical problem, you break it down to smaller technical tasks, right? That you can actually try to accomplish. If it's, let's say, people problem, then you need to start thinking like, what are the things that you need to focus on? Or the things that, might be, you delegate to other people, let's say people and culture as an example, right? To help you with certain journey. It could be like, a manager above you to help you with certain things. And the other things that actually within your area that you can actually help. So essentially, like, it's more about like the time boxing and like actually breaking it down to multiple things.
Amazing. And I think a lot of that comes with like maturity and life experience to become that self-aware, to be like, this isn't my area of expertise. I'm gonna reach out for this.
I think I found like sometimes like people, remember like people sometimes say like fake it until you make it. Yeah, I've seen a lot of people doing that. And sometimes, when you know about things, you're like, okay, I know like you're doing the wrong thing, but you can't just say like, oh, you're doing it wrongly. You need to actually help them, right, within the journey. Essentially like reflecting back to what you know and acknowledging you don't actually know, I think is the most powerful thing, because that's, as a human, you can never like say, I don't actually know. Yeah.
Amazing. That is so insightful. So thank you so much for all of your time. That's all of our questions for today. But I really appreciate your time, Daniel, and thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Amazing. Bye.
Bye.